Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I'm joined on the stage by New York City Buildings Commissioner Rick Chandler, New York City Department of Investigations Chief Mark Peters, Commissioner Mark Peters, OSHA Area Director KG, Port Authority Inspector General Mike Nestor, who is also a member of our construction task force team, MTA Inspector General Barry Kluger, and from my office, ADA Meredith McGowan, who is the attorney responsible for presentation of the case to the grand jury, Hildeline Colon, a coordinator of our construction task force, Diana Florence, who is the attorney in charge of our construction task force, Judy Salwen, the principal deputy chief of the Rackets Bureau, Jody Kane, the chief of the Rackets Bureau, and Mike Sachs, chief of our investigation division. I thank all of them for their hard work in this case. We're here again to talk about another case in furtherance of enhancing construction safety in New York City. Our city's building boom is now entering its 5th year, and it's still going strong, thankfully. According to a report by the New York Building Congress Construction, spending is expected to reach $6.5 billion by the end of $61.5 billion by the end of 2018. And that is a record high in the city's history. Residential construction, and especially massive high-end luxury residential construction, continues to grow as neighborhoods transform in all our 5 boroughs, with 34.6 million gross square feet of residential space coming online this year alone. Now, this is a boom like none that contractors have seen before, and those contractors are obviously eager to strike into construction projects while the iron is hot. But amid the constant backdrop that we see of hazards around construction sites, caution tape, and scaffolding, sometimes it is all too easy to forget that there is a human cost to all this development. 158,000 New Yorkers now make up our New York City's construction workforce. And it's these workers, men, women, union, non-union, born here and born elsewhere, who build and grow our city. And it's these workers who pay the price when construction supervisors cut corners in order to build faster, just to make more money from building faster. Now, in case after case that we've discussed around construction fraud from this podium, we've talked about workers who paid that price with serious injury and sometimes with their lives. When greed eclipses respect for safety and basic dignity of human life, it's the workers, those who physically make the building in this construction boom, who pay that price. This is a story as old as New York City. But here is what's changed in the past several years in this industry. There is now a recognition that this type of conduct by certain contractors may be criminal. If you cut corners or maim your workers, it's not just a scheduled delay, a stop work order, or a civil lawsuit you have to worry about. It may well become a criminal prosecution by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, working with our construction fraud task partners. Beginning with the tragic loss of life of Carlos Moncayo and the landmark manslaughter conviction that we collectively secured in that case, construction greed resulting in death of the industry has continued. But the industry has taken notice of our work, not just in this jurisdictions, but in other jurisdictions around the country, filing criminal charges for reckless worker deaths in other states. On one of these posters, I'm afraid I can't see from here, is a rendering of the 11-story luxury mixed-use residential property now going up between 3rd and Lexington Avenues, running from East 125th to East 126th in Harlem. It's called the Gotham Residential Project. Now you see in the picture, the facade of that building, it's a checkerboard curtain wall with alternating blackened stainless steel panels and glazed window panels. A subcontractor called Western Specialty Contractors was hired to install that facade, with the defendants Terrence Edwards and Timothy Braco in charge of the job, serving as the site supervisor and the branch manager, respectively. In June, Edwards and Braco began directing the curtain wall installation for the project. Now, their initial plan was to use a traditional crane, like the ones you see in the streets of New York City, to lift the panels into place. But then that plan changed. Edwards and Braco, as alleged in the indictment, instead decided to order a mini crane manufactured by a company called Gecko. Now, a mini crane is different from a traditional crane. Mini cranes are a relatively recent innovation which contractors like to use because they are mobile and generally cheaper to use. That's why mini cranes are becoming so popular in New York City, but their mobility is also what makes them so dangerous. Now, the Department of Buildings and Rick Chandler have been all over mini cranes. In May 2017, the commissioner announced strict regulations for use of these cranes, which require that crane operators be trained for the specific model of the crane they are using, and that those contractors submit detailed plans drawn by a licensed engineer, how the crane will be used, how it will support the intended load, and where it will be tethered to make sure that it doesn't fall over. Only then will the Department of Buildings give you an alteration type 2 building permit, which allows you to begin work using a mini crane. Our federal partners at OSHA, who are here today as well, have a similar regulation. But as alleged in this indictment, Edwards and Braco ordered that mini crane for the Gotham project anyway, even though none of the workers were trained to use it, and even though they didn't have a DOB-approved plan to use it safely. The regulations went unheeded, and so did several warnings. On June 20, Western's expediter on the project sent both Edwards and Braco an email saying they needed a DOB alteration type 2 permit, including engineer's drawing, to use the Gecko mini crane. And as alleged in the indictment, they sadly ignored that direction. The next day, June 21, a representative of the local 580 union did a walkthrough of the project. It's alleged that Edwards told him for the first time that they planned to use a mini crane. The union rep immediately replied in no uncertain terms this was the first the union was hearing about it, that none of the men he had sent to the site were certified to use it, and that they should not use it. The union rep actually told them, we can get you a Gecko crane, but we'll need a certification class before the crane arrives, which would be coming in a few days. So, pointing to a start date of June 27, just 6 days later, the union rep said that they could have that training before June 27. Edwards and Braco, as alleged in the indictment, waved them off. Time is money, so they decided not to wait. They ignored regulations, they ignored these specific warnings, and they also lied, telling a supervisor at Western that they got the permit they needed when they had not. So on June 25, rather than waiting 2 more days for a properly trained worker and with no permit in hand, Edwards is alleged to have directed an untrained, uncertified iron worker to operate this mini crane. No engineer had ever assessed the configuration of the crane or whether it could safely lift the intended glass panels. In fact, the Gecko mini crane had a load limit of 880 pounds, and they were using it to lift a weight of 1,500 pounds. More significantly, Edwards and Braco, it's alleged, did not even bother to tether the crane, all but ensuring that when it was in use, it would topple over. Now, I believe you've all been shown the video, a very short video of the incidents, and if not, we'll obviously make that available to you. The crane, if you did see it, you'll see that it was overloaded, unsecured, and when it was lifting one of the panels from the 2nd floor to the 3rd floor, fell forward. Its boom reached back into the 3rd floor, grabbing iron worker Mr. Delgado, Christopher Jackson, and violently catapulting Mr. Jackson to the ground. When the boom hit the 3rd floor, it also struck another iron worker, Jorge Delgado, in the back, pushing him further into the building. First responders immediately transported Jackson and Delgado to Harlem Hospital in that neighborhood. Now, Mr. Jackson is a 39-year-old native of St. Louis who was living in Queens. He has suffered severe head trauma from being flung 3 stories down to the ground. He is currently in a long-term rehabilitation facility where he is battling traumatic brain injury, which has affected his ability to speak and to walk. Mr. Delgado is a 37-year-old father from the Bronx. He has suffered severe spinal injuries, impairing his ability to walk and to move around. Now, for this conduct, Supervisors Braco and Edwards have been charged by a grand jury with 2 counts each of assault in the 2nd degree, a Class D felony, as well as 2 counts each of reckless endangerment, a Class A misdemeanor. They'll be arraigned this afternoon at 2:30 p.m. before Judge Klott on the 9th floor of 111 Center Street. The room is 948. Now, Western Specialty, to its credit, their company cooperated fully in this investigation, entered into a deferred prosecution agreement with our office, and under that DPA, as it's called, they have agreed to retain an independent monitor that will ensure compliance with the regulations, to overhaul its safety training, and to fund new public service announcements in English and Spanish to educate workers to their right to a safe workplace. In this sense, we believe that the deferred prosecution agreement with Western actually will make workplaces safer. It's a strong resolution, we believe, that will result, as I said, in safer work sites across the city. But actually, and I'll close at this, we need stronger laws that actually deter companies and their supervisors from placing workers at harm in the first place. We need to prevent these accidents with the deterrent effect of the law, not just prosecute them tragically after the fact. And that is why, for several years, I and my colleagues here have called for New York State to raise the maximum fines for construction companies that they can be ordered to pay when they kill or maim a worker. The maximum fine today is $10,000. Now, $10,000 for companies building buildings of this scale and of this worth is literally monopoly money. It's a rounding error. It's an amount that does not deter companies from cutting corners. Rather, it's an amount that they can simply pay, and it's a price they're willing to pay to complete the job. $10,000 minimum fine, I believe, really is an insult to workers and their families who have been seriously injured or who have been fatally injured in their workplace. The New York State Legislature should increase the fine to $1 million when they come back in January. And I'm hoping the new Senate majority, exercising its legislative authority, will take this up immediately. In the meantime, my office, the Department of Buildings, and our Construction Frauds Task Force are urging workers and passersby to learn how to identify mini cranes, spot violations, and report them directly to us. As you can see on whichever one of these is the mini crane poster, you can report to us anonymously via WhatsApp, or call DOB's hotline, or call 311. You can use our WhatsApp to report all construction-related crimes, by the way, including wage theft, and that number is 646-712-0298. The message that we want to send is that we are here to protect your safety and to protect your rights. So I'd like to close by thanking all the agencies, as well as the dedicated investigators and assistant DAs who assisted with today's investigation on the Construction Task Force. They've been vital partners with our office, and we're very grateful. I'd now like to introduce DOB Commissioner Chandler, who will say a few words.
Thank you, District Attorney Vance, as well as our partners at the Department of Investigation and OSHA, with whom we worked closely on this investigation. This multi-agency effort reflects the city's commitment to use all of our tools at our disposal to protect construction workers and the public. When DOB inspectors arrived at the scene of this incident, they discovered one of the most appalling safety lapses in recent memory. The supervisors of this site, who were supposed to be responsible for safety, had instead set in motion a reckless and potentially lethal chain of events. Their callous disregard for safety rules, combined with inadequate training and equipment that was not fit for the job, clearly nearly lost the lives of several workers and possibly the public. At the time of the incident, a team of workers were using a mini crane to install a curtain panel for a new 11-story mixed-use building on East 125th Street. DOB requires permits for the use of mini cranes such as this one, but the contractor in this case was performing the work illegally. For reasons that this incident makes obvious, the city also requires mini crane operators to have their licenses from DOB or valid certifications from the crane manufacturer showing that they can operate the equipment safely. None of the workers at the 125th Street site had this training, but their supervisors directed them to use the crane anyway. Lastly, the lifting capacity of the crane was 880 pounds, but the panel the workers were directed to install weighed far more than that, between 1,300 and 1,500 pounds. This witch's brew of illegal work, grossly negligent safety supervision, and overtaxed equipment caused the crane to plummet 4 stories to the ground, dragging one of the workers down with it. It's a miracle that the workers survived and no pedestrians were harmed. The sheer recklessness on display in this case makes today's indictment so necessary. Bad actors on construction sites need to know that they can be held accountable criminally especially if they're putting workers in harm's way. Following this incident, DOB swept sites with permits for mini cranes, and we upped our inspections of all sites we visit to find cranes that are not properly permitted. Indeed, just last week, we shut down a construction site in Manhattan for using a mini crane without permits. Lastly, we're also in the process of creating a separate hoisting machine operator license class for mini cranes. I'd like to thank the staff of our Cranes and Derricks unit who provided technical support for this case and for all the work that they do every day to make our city safer. And this includes working collaboratively with equipment manufacturers and contractors, but also taking aggressive action to hold them accountable when they put workers and the public at risk. District Attorney Vance, thank you again for your commitment to safety and for your partnership on this case.
Thanks, Rick. I'd now like to introduce the OSHA Director, KG, a critical federal partner in all that we do in this area. Thank you, Kay.
Thank you. Okay. So I'd like to thank District Attorney Vance and his staff for inviting OSHA to participate in this press conference today. Providing a safe and helpful workplace for employees is first and foremost an employer's responsibility. That responsibility is set forth in federal, state, and local laws and regulations which our agencies enforce and which employers must comply. Compliance by employers is critical in preventing incidents and conditions that may injure or sicken their employees or cost them their lives. Employers can enhance compliance by implementing effective, safe, and health systems and programs. Such programs will help them address and assess workplace conditions, practices, and equipment to keep incidents and injuries from occurring in the first place. And when employers don't comply, OSHA will continue to work with our federal, state, and local law enforcement colleagues to achieve safe and healthful workplaces and hold employers accountable if they disregard their safety and health responsibility and obligations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce Mark Peters, the Commissioner for the Department of Investigation.
Thank you, District Attorney Vance, Department of Buildings Commissioner Rick Chandler, the other members of the Construction Fraud Task Force, including OSHA, the MTA, and the Port Authority. Together, we make a great team on these important construction fraud investigations. Today's announcement furthers our strong work in this area and our effort to protect New Yorkers from disreputable contractors who circumvent the city's construction safety rules and endanger their workers and the public. This was a tragedy that did not need to happen. The city's building code has rules designed to prevent this from happening. People on site warned the defendants so that it wouldn't happen, but defendants ignored the city's construction safety rules and ignored the warnings, and so this tragedy did happen. This investigation showed that a 39-year-old construction worker was flung from a building and gravely injured because the defendants did not file for a proper city permit, did not tie back the mini crane, did not use properly trained and certified staff. Instead, they chose saving time and money over the safety of their workers, according to the charges. Following these city rules would have meant a delay of approximately 2 to 3 days, but defendants couldn't wait even that long. This investigation underscores what the investigators and prosecutors on this podium have seen again and again. Shortcutting city construction safety rules is dangerous and risks the safety of workers. To that end, after this serious incident in East Harlem, DOI probed other jobs that Western was performing in New York City with similar mini cranes to see whether there were other improper uses. In fact, DOI uncovered that a Brooklyn site on 5th Avenue, Western was also using a similar mini crane to erect a steel structure roof, but again had not obtained the proper permit. They had not filed the required plans with DOB or obtained the proper permitting. DOI worked with DOB to get the construction site shut down through a stop work order in that case. Before I end, I want to thank District Attorney Vance and his team for their incredible partnership on this investigation, especially Assistant District Attorney Meredith McGowan, under the supervision of Attorney in charge of the Construction Fraud Task Force, Diana Florence, Chief of the Rackets Bureau, Jody Kane, and Chief of the Investigation Division, Michael Sachs. I want to thank Commissioner Chandler and his team at DOB, who've worked with us on a number of these matters. As I said, our teams work in partnership to expose construction fraud, and DOI is supportive of the current legislative effort that the district attorney just mentioned that he has been pushing for to increase penalties for contractors and companies that disregard the city's construction code and endanger the safety of their workers and New Yorkers. Safety should be worth more than the current $10,000 fine. Finally, I want to thank DOI's investigative team, including Investigative Inspector Ross Hoffman, Chief Investigator James McGillicuddy, Assistant Inspector General Dan Taylor under the supervision of Inspector General Greg Cho, Associate Commissioner Jay Flaherty, Deputy Commissioner and Chief of Investigation Susan Lambiase, and First Deputy Commissioner Leslie Brovner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'd now like to ask Inspector General Mike Nestor to join us from the Port Authority.
Good morning. The Port Authority Inspector General's Office is honored to be a member of the DA's Construction Fraud Task Force and working with other distinguished members on helping to maintain the integrity of the construction industry in New York City. The Port Authority has a huge capital construction program that includes construction projects at many of our facilities, including major development programs at each of the 3 largest airports. In addition to investigating and prosecuting those that would compromise the integrity and safety of construction projects and the public, the task force works to implement reforms and new standards that would benefit everyone involved in the construction industry, and most importantly, the public. I want to thank DA Vance for his strong leadership in this area and thank his superb staff for their dedication and hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And last but definitely not least is Barry Kluger from the MTA.
Thank you. Fortunately or unfortunately, it has become a habit for me and other members of the Construction Fraud Task Force to stand before you announcing the indictments of individuals and charges being brought against companies involved in the construction industry. Under the leadership of DA Vance and his exemplary staff, we have come to recognize the importance of working together to uncover fraud and abuse. This effort, as exemplified by today's announcement, has extended to the vital area of worker and public safety as well. The MTA, the Port Authority, the city and state, we all share the same contractors. It is imperative that we continue to pool our resources and work aggressively to deter and detect unsafe and fraudulent activity within the construction industry. As to Western contractors or their subsidiaries, the MTA has utilized this company on 2 now completed MTA projects. While there is no indication or reason to believe that their work was substandard or not in compliance with safety regulations, I have brought this matter to the attention of MTA officials and have recommended a further review to ensure that their work does not pose a present or future safety risk to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, all my colleagues. What we'd like to do now is to take on-topic questions if you have any. And when those are done, I'm going to ask our guests to step off, and I'll be able to take off-topic questions if there are any. So, on-topic questions.
Yes, how come the company itself isn't indicted?
The company has, as I said, entered into what's called a Deferred Prosecution Agreement. And that is an agreement which is a public document and I think is available to you for your review, which obligates them to do very specific steps, such as obtaining a monitor, such as providing money for public service announcements to make sure that we are educating those men and women who are working about how to report any irregularities at construction sites. We believed that the company was, with our office, fully cooperative, making witnesses available to us, making documentary evidence available to us in a timely manner, for us to move this investigation quickly. If they violate the terms of the deferred prosecution agreement, they can be charged, and the evidence obtained can be used against them. They are charged and will be then dismissed if they complete the conditions of the agreement. So currently, they are charged, but it will be dismissed if they meet the conditions of the agreement. Yes?